see. Friends. Hi, friends. Okay, there we go. Hi, friends. And welcome to my weekly stream about the Uno platform. My name is Jérôme Laban. I'm the CTO of the open source project Uno platform. And I'm spending about a week, an hour every week to take a look at what's happening in the Uno platform and taking a look at implementing features and answering questions like the ones that we're seeing here. On the chat. Welcome. I see Jose and Sluggies Rex that have questions, so we'll hop onto that in a few minutes. And I mentioned on Twitch, on Twitter, that I've been installing the latest preview of Visual Studio 17.4 preview 4 that we've been waiting for a bit, which includes the support for .NET mobile SDK, .NET mobile workspaces, RC2. So those are used by Uno, and we want to be able to target .NET 7. So that's why we were waiting for that version a lot. And we're also upgrading UnoCheck to get to that support as well. So there's a bit of fiddling around there to find the right NuGet feeds and others, but expect that to come very soon. So we're in Hacktoberfest. Uno platform accepts contributions, and if you want to participate and have prizes when you contribute on the Uno platform repository, we have quite a few of those that are part of the Hacktoberfest. And one of the repository that has a lot of activity is the list of the curated list that we have created here. And most of them are in the Uno Gallery sample app. And that one is interesting because it allows to see what the Uno platform is able to provide. And one of the categories that we've added recently is one that allows to have non-UI demos shown. So we're talking about things like geolocation and things like that we didn't have. We were having the Uno Gallery application mostly showing features that were visual. And now we also add those for you to test. So those are available on mobile and others. So if you want to join, take a look at that list and let us know. And I probably should be a bit smaller than that. And so that is it. And I see that I'm a bit out of the, let me change that a little bit. It's not too nice. I moved a few things around here, and it does show a little bit. So maybe I should be doing just this that way. There you go. That's probably better. Okay. So let's take a look at what we're going to be doing today. So we're talking about a few things. So Visual Studio 17.4. So we're going to be testing this out, and I'm going to be taking a look at one of the features that we had looked at last week. Which was the X-Bind casting. But just before that, let's take a look at the questions. So we had Jose that asked one question. So what's the difference between Uno Platform App Linux using GTK and Linux Frame Buffer? So the difference between the two is about the shell. So how does an Uno app integrate with the system? So on Linux, for instance, or well, if we're talking Linux specifically. So GTK is going to be a GTK app. So that means that if you have any kind of window manager, whether it's an X11 or I've lost the name. I don't remember that name, but anyways, so another type of window manager, that the Uno app is going to be integrating with this, and Uno is going to be using all the features that are provided by the shell. So that means that, for instance, opening files, having access to closing the app, or maximizing the window size and things like that. So that's what happened. Wayland, thank you very much. The Linux Frame Buffer is very different in a sense that it's mostly used by low-end devices or embedded devices that don't have a window manager running. And that particular version of the app is using the Linux Frame Buffer feature. So basically, Uno is going to be writing to a byte array in a sense to make it blunt, and that means that it's pretty much your terminal and then drawing on top of the terminal that you're in, or another frame buffer. Let's say you have a second screen with hash, which has a frame buffer as well. It makes for smaller apps in terms of the footprint in memory, but it has less features because that means that there's no maximizing windows because there's no window and things like that. So that's the idea of the difference between Linux frame buffer and GTK. Why is Uno pixel perfect and Maui not? Well, the big difference is, and we're talking about the way Maui draws its content right now, and not necessarily what has been happening with, I think it's Maui Graphics, which is an implementation that does pixel perfect. But when we're talking about the implementation right now, Maui is basically, and Xamarin Forms was doing that right in the same way. Maui is rendering controls, the native controls, and presenting them as is on the screen. So you can modify some parts of those controls so that they look a bit more to what you want, but you don't have full control over those controls because they may not render, because the underlying platform may not provide those specifics to change the visuals. Now, Uno, what it does is removes the Chrome for all controls, and pretty much, there's the only control that stays will be the one that has the input, let's say text input, and that one is just stripped of everything, so it just shows the caret and that's it. And the rest is going to be displayed the same way for all platforms. So visually, your application is going to be looking the same, and that's the important part there when showing the differences between Uno platform and Maui with regards to pixel perfectness. That's the idea. Now, there are many other differences between Uno platform and Maui, but that you can find in the documentation for both. And last question that was from Jose, does Linux frame buffer use Skia? Yes, it does. It's the same rendering as the GTK version. Maybe the only difference with the use of Skia is that GTK uses, wherever possible, it uses OpenGL. Where the Linux frame buffer implementation does not. It uses software rendering. So if you're using a software rendering in 4K, it may be a bit slow. So just so you know. And Sluggies Rex said, hey, I wanted to drop in and say how much I appreciate your help with uncaught exit status exception. Of course, no problem. If you're getting to make it work, let us know. We're always interested in seeing what people are doing with the Uno platform. So let's go back to our Xbind casting stuff. So the idea, and for those that were not listening last week, we're trying to get to a point where we can be able to use castlink like this. So where I'm taking an Xbind expression. So I have a navigation view, the selected item for which the property is an object. I want to be able to cast that object into a navigation view item and then do a dot name on it so I can data bind it to whatever control uses a value as a string. So that's the idea. And because Xbind uses the actual code behind, so it generates code from it, it has to do things like typecasting and others because there's no reflection done in any way there. And Uno was not handling that properly, since Xbind was introduced. So we're going to be taking a look at how to implement this and continue what we did last week. So last week we created a few tests, and now we're going to be seeing what happens when we move forward. So what I have here is a branch that has the Xbind cast that I had last week. And what I generally do for this type of work is to open the unit test filter. So we're talking about that one, the Nets 461. So it's Uno UI tests. And I'm opening that solution filter. For a reminder, we use solution filter because the number of projects that are inside the solution is very large, and Visual Studio is not able to handle all of this without eating too much memory. So let's go ahead and open that solution filter. So I already have the Uno target framework override set here. This is the cross-targeting override props file. So let's open all of this. So in the past week, we've also been working on a few other things, and we're going to be talking about this along the way. One of the interesting things is that we started adding the .NET 7 support for WebAssembly and Skia. And that's going to be very interesting. It's going to be in the next release, so you can try testing it today if you want to. Just know there may be dragons, so we're still working on it. And so let's build our test. I think we do have a few tests over there. So we have our explain rewriter, and we want to see if the content we add here is working properly. So let's rebuild this. In the meantime, I think it's going to be building soon-ish. Let's see, it's probably just waiting for everything to load up properly. Test from cache, there we go. Okay, so it's still parsing because I just opened the solution. Probably should have been opening it before. No, still not there. Okay. There we go. Okay, so it's building. One thing that we added last week, or in the past week, is the ability to have Android SDK platform level 31 is not installed. That is interesting. So it's probably because of the version of Visual Studio that I'm using. And I'm not going to be spending time on this one. So we're just going to be moving to, actually, let's maybe take a look at what we're talking about here. So in the Android SDK manager, we should be having Android SDKs. Ah, I see. So it was removed, maybe 31. There you go. So for some reason, the SDK 31 was removed. Okay, so let's add it and see if that helps. So while it installs, I was talking about the Bootstrapper update that we added last week, which is the ability to have obfuscation for assemblies in WebAssembly applications. And that one is actually interesting because there were some customers that were coming back to us saying, well, your application that is developed in WebAssembly has been blocked by my antivirus provider, whichever it is. And then the problem is that I cannot get the application running, and naming the files .clr, that's what happens when we deploy the application. Doesn't, the tooling is able to do deep inspection of the files, detects that CLR files are DLLs, and then if they're downloaded, they get filtered out, and the application as a result doesn't work. So what we're doing, and that's going to be included, that's included in the latest dev bits of the Uno WebAssembly Bootstrapper, is that you can obfuscate the content of the assemblies. And what that means is that we're basically generating and we're obfuscating the content by using an XOR transform. Not saying encryption because it's not really encryption, because it's a super easy it's a super easily decrypted content. But the idea is just to obfuscate a little bit with a key that's not too easy to get out. So the key is embedded into the application, so it's not encrypted in any way. You can get the files if you want to, but it means that when they're downloaded, those files are not DLLs and read as is. So we're going to be doing something like it's not enabled by default, but it's something that you can enable in your application if you want to evade the detection by antiviruses that may be installed in your corporate network, for instance. So that's one of the interesting things that happened during the past week for the Uno Bootstrapper. So the installation succeeded here. We're talking about API 31. No, it didn't work. Okay, so what happened here? Okay, so it looks like it installed a Google image. It didn't install the Android SDK. So what's happening here? Okay, should be relatively fast. Yeah, it's not too bad. Okay, so what we had before, what we knew was not working is, so this one we fixed. So the idea is that we have a my property that's of a certain type, and then we have it should be rewritten to have a context before, because this is part of the context, and we have that property afterwards. So it's just a property accessor from the my class type that was added in front of my property. So that's what we did last week. We also have a, if I remember correctly, a unit test that we had implemented before. Let me just maybe revert some of it. I think I had test. No, I don't have one here. Let me see. What do I have in the history? Maybe I had one more. No, it was only that. Okay, so we're probably going to be adding an additional test to validate that we have the right behavior. So what we were trying to do is to get the rewriter here to work on that second piece. So we're going to be validating that once the installation of the SDK has finally finished. There we go. So let's see, does it build this time, or do we have to restart Visual Studio? So that is interesting, because that would mean that for some reason Visual Studio uninstalled the SDK, the SDK. So, and that is another one. Okay, so we have the problem with the Mac SDK. That one is an issue that was introduced recently because of the release of Xcode 14. And that one can be fixed by either removing that target, and that's probably going to be what we're going to be doing now, or we can do, actually, let's go find the fix. Now, this is something that that was broken by Visual Studio, and we can go get the fix somewhere. Let's try to get to our toolkit. I think we had the fix there. Uno UI toolkit, there we go. And then there's a pull request that was done a few days ago that added that specific fix, which is Xamarin Mac workaround. So that's the one. So I see Onionware is here. Thanks for joining. Glad I could help. So let us know where it goes. And actually, just right after this, we're going to take a look at your specific issue that you had. The error message was not clear, so it's something that we can fix. And we're going to take a look at that just right after we take a look at that specific issue. So to get that fix running, we need to pick up one specific change that was added. So we're talking about this block here. And we're going to be adding it at the end of the project that doesn't build, which is the Uno XAML project here. So hopefully that gets resolved at the end of the month when Xcode 14.1 gets released. We'll see. So targets framework is Xamarin Mac, and that's probably it. So let's see, what do we have here? Does it build now? Okay, we have it. Okay, so the workaround is done. So now let's try again to see if we can have our parsing to work properly. The test is passed, so it's still working. So now what we're going to do is try to see if the data row that we have at the top here, so that's one of the other pieces that didn't work. So if I have a function and then I have a parameter that needs to be typecast, then does it work? So if it does not, then we're going to be adjusting a little bit the parser or the rewriter to get to something that allows us to get that running. So so we have the XBind rewriter, and then we can take a look at this one. It says expected context my function, and it got context my function my property. So okay, so we can see here that it is now having a context in front, which is good, because my function is actually something that we can get working, but we're not getting the my property here that has a context in front, and that is something that we need to change. So we're going to dig into the XBind parser to see if we can get to that specific point where we should be adding the context in front and we're not. And it's likely that it's because of the fact that because it worked before, it worked for this one, but it's likely not working because we're making the change. We're not intercepting properly that it's that we're inside a function function call, and it's not doing the right thing. So let's go and see what we need to change. So in the changes that we made, we had visit identifier name, and we had a few things. So let's see if we can get to that point. So we're talking about the visit identifier name. Visit identifier name, there we are. So let's see if we can get the context set in front. We're talking about the context builder here that should be in front of the identifier. And we're going to see if we can get to that line specifically. So I'm going to be removing the test that's not useful here. And we're going to be starting the test again and see if we can get something running. Okay, so we're visiting the identifier that is my function. So that's not the one we're looking at. So my function is that identifier. That's not the one we're looking at. That is global. That is not useful. System and 32. So that's the parsing of that part. That's not the identifier that we're looking at. Okay, my property. Okay, so now we're inside of my property, and we should be, if I go just move one past, and we can see here that the parent is not considered valid, and it's probably because we're not matching any of those issues. So it says, are we inside a method? So we're not inside a method. So that's probably one of the issue, and could be because we're in front of a cast expression. So probably not moving up enough in the stack. So there may be multiple ways to deal with this. We're going to go take a look at what is inside that method above here. So if we dig into is inside method, we're looking at the invocation expression just above. So if let's take a look at what happens when I take this expression and I put it inside the Roslyn quarter. And we can see here that we have an invocation expression that's inside an argument list, that's inside a cast expression, that's inside many other things. And what we probably should be taking a look at is the fact that if we're inside of a cast expression or inside of an argument, it's likely that the cast probably should be taking the identifier as a whole and then use it as a way to prefix the identifier with the context. So in here, if we take a look here, I think we had a few things we had before. So it said if we're inside a cast with parentheses, and that one was one we added before. So that was that expression. But here we're not inside of a cast with a parenthesis. So that may be something that we can change. Let's make that change to see if we can just let's see if we can just make that change and just add another test, let's say inside a cast without parentheses for now, and see if we can get to something. So if we take a look at the original expression here, we have a cast expression, but that's directly an argument. So we can just let's take the fact that the parent of the cast expression is not a parenthesized expression, but it's just an argument syntax. I'm just gonna take it like this. let's say, let's call it as argument, for instance, inside cast as argument, and see if we can get something that works there. It's probably not the best way to do it because we're handling cases individually, but we can probably do something different. Just want to see if that helps with regards to the result of the test. So if I run this, it's not good enough. Probably because we're not testing it properly. So let's see. We're going to spend a bit more time on it, and then we're going to go to something else. So that is not good. Probably remove the... That's interesting. I didn't have my breakpoints hit. It's probably another caching issue that happened. Okay, there we go. So our node here is my function, not the one that we want. Just going to be putting the node here. Global system in 32, my property. Okay, so my property, if I ask, is it a inside cast? It says true. Okay, so it says it valid parent, but for some reason, oh, it should have worked. So why didn't it? Okay, so I see context my property. So maybe I may have failed for another reason. So did it work this time? Maybe it's just rebuilding that didn't work. Oh, that's the rebuild that didn't work. That's interesting. So it may be because I changed part of rewriting, maybe. That's interesting. So there's still a few things that are not working with updating the code that when you're changing your tests. But anyways, okay, so that looks good. So let's just uncomment everything and see if all the tests do work. And we're going to add one more test to see if it still works, because it may break. So everything passed, which is good. So now we can add a second test to say that it's my property dot inner, for instance. Does it still work? Because it may not. Because at that point, we have an expression, but that expression is probably the parent of that expression may not be a parameter, so it may behave differently as a result. So let's see if we get the right result. It worked. Okay, so even that worked. So that means that when we're evaluating this one, we're seeing that the parent is not an argument for a function. And then we get to that result. So it's very specific code that handles parameters that are typecast. It's probably fine because we're not handling that many cases with regards to how parameters are handled. But that means that we can do some interesting thing here, and that is working properly as expected. So that is good. That is good. So let's do this. So we're probably going to have a PR later this week that adds typecasting of function parameters, as well as typecasting for just properties that are untyped. So that's going to be nice. There we go. And I think I can do a force because I'm on my own branch and it's okay. Okay, so that's it. So now let's take a look at one of the issues that we had just a bit earlier and that Onionware just experienced in a pretty bad way. We're talking about the fact that if you're trying to reference Uno inside of a WinApp SDK application, and that can happen transitively. So let's say, well, let's actually do this and see what we get. So I'm going to create an application and I'm going to reproduce the steps that Onionware did today when trying to migrate his application, his or her application. So let's see. Let's make an application. So let's say WinApp SDK transitive Uno. Hey, McNitz, thanks for joining again. You're becoming a regular. Thank you very much. So we need just let's take just GTK and WinUI. So that's going to be good enough. So the idea here is that when we're taking the approach of having an application that uses the let's see, the community toolkit, it's not obvious, to start with, that when you're installing the community toolkit, you have to install it in two ways. The first one is the packages that you're referencing for the Uno target, and the packages that you have to reference for the WinApp SDK targets. So what we're going to try to do here is make it fail and try to fix this. So let's say I didn't read the documentation and I'm going to be adding support for Uno. So let's say I want that package. I'm going to be adding that package, searching for Uno somewhere in NuGet. I have that version of the community toolkit WinUI controls, and I'm going to be installing it on all my projects. So it will not fail. And there's a very good reason for it. And that reason is the fact that the Uno version of the community toolkit has a net standard variant for the target frameworks. And because of that, the WinApp SDK is going to say, well, no problem. You have a net standard version of your binaries, so I'm going to be using those. And what happens is that you're going to be transitively referencing all the Uno platform assemblies, and those are going to be clashing with the DLLs that are coming from that are going to be coming from WinApp SDK. So first, you're going to get a few weird errors like dependency object generator doesn't work. So probably that one is just the fact that we're referencing a few other dependencies. But the most important one is a compiler error that says cannot resolve type universe Uno UI version 255 and all that goes. So when that happens and you're building a Windows head, this means that there's something wrong that happened and you're trying to reference something that shouldn't happen. So when you take a look at the dependency chain, you can see here that you're referencing the Uno toolkit. And then when you dig a little bit more, then you're going to find Uno WinUI. And that cannot be there in a Windows app. That's going to fail, and it's not clear why. So what we're going to do is change the version that is installed here. And what I'm going to do is just to make sure that we're not changing an incorrect version. So I'm going to be installing explicitly Uno on that project. Uno. Actually, maybe it may be that if I install it explicitly, it may not fail. So let's try it. So I'm saying uno.winui. If I write it the right way, it's going to be better. And still not on the right NuGet feed. So let's see if I install that NuGet package explicitly. If I still get the errors, it may not. It may be that we're not going to get the same error, but let's try it anyways. So we're installing a few packages. And let's see if we rebuild, if we do get something different. So it looks like it's different. And it may be because of transitive things. Okay, no, it still fails. Okay, that's good. So it behaved a little bit differently. It's probably because we fixed a few things inside of Uno, and that's why the original messages that we saw before installing the latest preview, but it still fails because it doesn't find Uno. Okay, so what we're going to do is edit the cached version of Uno here for that version, which is that version. It's the find it 4.6 dev 572. So let's go to our NuGet here. And we go to Uno WinUI. We're going to pick up the last version of it, and we're going to take the build transitive files here. So the one that we're interested in is the Net Standard 2, and I see that there are multiple ways to do it, but the first one is the fact that we have already UAP things here. We also have Net 5 Windows, and the thing is that it should be having taken that version of the Windows APIs, Windows DLLs, but it didn't for some reason. So it may be that we need to change something. The thing is that for Windows, I know, and that's the other thing. Okay, so we're still having Net 5 Windows for the reason of the fact that WPF, when you're building for WPF, the Net 5 Windows is used. So if you're making, I don't have it here, but if you have the CID.WPF version, those files in the NuGet package for Uno WinUI are going to be used, and they're supposed to be here. The thing is that it's supposed to work when you're referencing WPF, but it's not supposed to work when you're referencing WinApp SDK. So what we're going to do is modify one of those files, because we are going to be matching Net5 here. We can probably validate that very quickly. So let's say, I think we do have a Uno WinUI target here. Is WinUI, so we could probably, let's make it break here. Let's add a new target. Let's call it WinApp SDK fail not supported. Well, it's fun. And we're going to say that that target needs to run before build. We're going to fail with an error like not supported. So I'm not going to take that message specifically because it may be misleading for people that don't understand how that works. But that's going to be helping. Yeah, so yeah, Sluggy's Rex saying that everyone struggles when installing the community toolkit. That's fair. We're working with the community toolkit folks to make it only one package. So basically having the Uno fork being included into the original community toolkit package, so you don't have to choose between one or the other. It's an historical and legacy reason for why that happens, mostly because of the fact that Uno comes from a very long background of things not working, and now we've implemented a lot of those. So that means that that's not necessarily needed now to have two versions, and this is getting better. So know that it's not going to stay that way. It's going to be improving. So we're getting there. So now we have that modification. So let's build and see if we fail. We should be failing. Okay, so there we go. So now we have WinApp SDK saying it's not supported, which is fine. That's what we're looking for. Now we should not be breaking for everything. So we should be breaking explicitly when WinApp SDK is used. And the thing is that we can't use Net 6 here, Windows. That doesn't work. We can't use this because, or parts of it. We cannot use this because this is valid for WPF, and we do support WPF as a target, and we've been doing this for the Uno Islands feature. So we need to find a way to detect specifically that WinApp SDK is being used. And for doing this, we're going to poke at the files that the WinApp SDK is using. So let's go take a look at the build logs, and we're going to find a property that we may be able to use to detect that we're inside of a WinApp SDK application. So you've seen here, I closed it too fast, but when you open something like this, you don't have all the files. You don't have the files tab here that happens to show everything that's needed to debug something like this. And we're going to be doing a compilation in the terminal so that we can get the bin log available to us so that we can troubleshoot the content and see what we're up against. So it fails in command line, which is fine. That's what we're expecting. But let's go and open our bin log and see in the files that we have. So in the files here tab, we're going to be taking a look at the NuGet files here. So we have a WinApp SDK here. I can say if an app is a WinApp SDK, so we're going to find the entry point for the targets here. There you go. That's a good one. If true, Windows App SDK deployment of WinUI versus Intel legacy deployment for testing only. Okay. It's not exactly the difference that we need to make out from outside, but it's probably good enough for us to be taking a dependency on. And we're going to be adding that test here. So if we say, so we can't do it. I don't know if we can do it here. That's part of the condition. So I don't know if it's going to be defined early enough. Let's see. We can determine if that's the case. Let's see, rebuild. WinApp SDK is not supported, and if we build using GTK, we can take a look here. We can see it's net 6. It's not going to be good enough, so we may need to create another app. So let's create another app because we actually need the WPF version. So let's create the WPF version. WinApp SDK error 02. So we need the WPF version. The others we don't need. We're going to do the same modification that we had before. And see if, so if I build, I will need to update the latest version of Uno again. And let's see, we have Uno here. Let's update to the latest. And let's rebuild again. So we should be failing again because we should be using the same version unless there's a new NuGet package that was published. That could happen. Oh, that's right. So I need to install again the community toolkit. Maybe not the community toolkit because it's not going to be referencing the right version. But let's go and add Uno to that NuGet to that package explicitly. Uno.WinUI. Okay, Uno.WinUI, we install that one. And then let's try to rebuild. Should be failing right away. There we go. Fails right away. And then if we take a look at the Skia version, the WPF version, which uses the same version of Uno, it should not be failing. Great. And we can see if we open the build log again, that our target was considered but not executed. So let's see if that's the case. Did I rebuild? I probably have not. The build finished. There we go. So if I take a look at my target that I added, which is named WinApp SDK not supported. There we go. We have the target WinApp SDK skipped due to condition WinApp SDK WinUI true evaluated as nothing equals true. So that works. So that means that the case for Onionware having issues with the fact that Uno was referenced in the wrong way, and that is going to be addressed now with an actual error message that will make sense. So we're probably going to be saying WinApp SDK is not supported. Uno.UI or Uno.WinUI should not be included in a WinApp SDK project or WinApp SDK head, maybe. And that you should not be removing, you should not be using it. So probably going to be having another document that explains why that happens and what can be done about it. Probably having something like talking about the differences between WinUI and Uno UI, or UWP and WinUI, and then talking about the community toolkit, which may happen to be there as well. So there you have it. It's a small one, but it's an important one. So easy to fix, but something that can be added pretty quickly inside of a project. So there you have it. So now let's take a look quickly at the last issue that we had for today, which is one that has been opened a few days ago. And it's, I think it was called XAML Reader is not supporting theme resources properly. Okay, so we have a code loaded by the XAML Reader that says that if it's specifying a theme resource inside of a resource file, it will produce the same results as the compiled version, or not resource file. The resource XAML will not produce the same result as the compiled version of XAML. Okay, so there's a sample here. Let's go take a look at that sample and see what that does. And it's supposed to be having a yellow border, but the sample is actually quite complex. So we probably should be changing that sample to make it easier to validate. And let's go make a sample out of it right away, a unit test right away. Okay, so we have our unit test here, and we're going to making another branch. Resources. And let's go find the tests for the XAML Reader. So we have many of those, as you can see here. And I think we had some for theme resources recently. Yeah, we had theme resources explicitly defined here. But it's likely that we were not supporting theme resources defined in control templates or something like that. So that looks like it, that looks like what the issue is. So let's try to build this one. So we're talking about theme resource inside in control template, I think it was. So we're talking about, if we take a look in here, we're talking about a theme resource. It's actually not even that. It's a theme resource in a style, and there's a content control that should be resolving that theme resource down to the content control that is here, and it's not resolving that value the right way. Okay, so let's pick up the whole page, and well, maybe not everything, just parts of it. And we have this. Okay, so I see Mignita has a question. I'm trying to modify uno.skia source, but my project shows me the file from the local source server. How can I force to use the last modified files? First you have to be able to build using the Uno sources, so that you can find here. So if you look at the docs, we have here contributing, I think, contributing here. You have building Uno. So that's the part that you need to follow, making sure that you're building the source. But then the important part is to determine if you're building for WinUI or UWP, and depending on which is which, you may need to choose the right branch to build from. And it's something that is not yet published in the documentation here, so I'm going to be showing it to you directly in the sources here. So let's go to the documentation. Uno development. I actually modified it yesterday, so it's not just yet published. And if you see, I think it's debug a building. I don't remember which one that is. I think it's build troubleshooting. It's a branch. No, I don't think I added it. I probably missed that part, because I thought I talked about another part. So let's go and figure one out. So we get compiling, building window UI. So there's one about WinUI down below. Okay, so there's the sync generator. Why don't I see it? Okay, no, it's not there. It's not there at all. So I thought it was supposed to be there, or maybe it's not merged. But anyways, the idea is that if you can build a source, depending on which one, if you're building the sources directly from the master, those sources are going to be UWP based. And if your application that you're building is WinUI based, you're going to be having to use another branch, and the documentation is not there, so I should be updating it. There's a branch that's called generated master WinUI autoconvert. And what that branch does is that it's a copy of master, but converted to WinUI, so you don't have to change it or convert it by hand. So when there's a merge on master, we automatically run a GitHub action that automatically converts everything, pushes a new set of sources, and you can use that as the starting version for your override. So then you're going to be having the WinUI sources that you can debug. So you may want to try that one, and let us know if it's something that doesn't work. So I'm going to be changing the documentation for this. This is definitely not right, because people are going to be spending time on it, and that's not good. There you go. That's a note. And there you go. So let's go back to our XAML reader thing. So we have our UI test here. It has pages, resources, and what we're going to do is just name a few controls to see what kind of colors we can get. So on that part, let's call it, so we're talking about my brush, border brush, theme resource, my brush. It's not the one we're looking for. Okay, so it's the border brush that we need to get, because that's the one that should be yellow, and that is not set properly, or at least that's what I think it should be. Let's go back again to that one. Should produce the same behavior. Okay, so it should be yellow. Okay, so we can see that it should be yellow. So my border brush, which is used in my border brush here, should be a border brush property, and the border brush property is used as part of the border brush at that location. And when it's a static resource, it works, I think, or not. I'm not too sure. But when it's a template, when it's a theme resource, it doesn't work. So let's go and try to figure what's happening with that one. Okay, so we're talking about border 1 here, and so the border brush for that one should be yellow if it works properly. And I think that one is a static resource. My style 1, my style 2. Interestingly, it's not doing what I think it should be doing. It's having all sorts of other colors, but not the one that I expected. Because it's setting yellow for a bluish color for the first one, but not for the other one. So my style 1 and my style 2. Do we override something here? There's no override. Oh, there's inheritance that happens. That's why. Okay, so the inheritance happens because it's not finding the resources that are defined as part of those color brushes. Okay, so that explains. So if I use green here, well, green, the background is green, so that doesn't work. Okay, so I have black here. So it uses the brush that has been defined here instead of the one that's been defined in the page resources. and it uses it uses a static resource instead of using so that's actually quite interesting, because let's try it with the XAML. Do I have it here? XAML Studio. I wonder, because there's something that's curious about the way the content is set. So this cannot work here. Let's name it a grid instead. A grid. Index name cannot work here. Ah, it cannot be defined that way. So let's make another one. Yeah, it has to be defined that way. Okay, so let's pick it up again. So if we go to XAML Studio, so XAML Studio is has been implemented by the XAML Llama, and it makes for interesting resolution that can happen. So what we're trying to figure out here is the actual behavior, and that's the right behavior. So we're getting black for my border brush that's been defined here. But the interesting part is that the yellow is still used for the second content control. That's quite interesting because it's a static resource, and it should have been overridden by the fact that the border is a parent, an actual parent of the stack panel, and that the page is above, and we overrode the border brush that's defined here. So I'm actually not too sure about why that happens that way, because it should be black and it's yellow. So we have a theme resource here, which is black. And because it's a static resource, it becomes yellow. There's probably a bit of the resolution logic that I don't recall here, because it should not be using the yellow as it's been overridden by the border version of it. So it may be that the resolution of static resources inside of a resource of a resource dictionary don't follow the same resolution as theme resources. So we're talking about static resource resolution that should be resolving inside of its own resource dictionary and not from the parents. So it's actually not a theme resource issue. It's actually really a static resource resolution issue where we are not resolving the right resource at the right location. Interestingly, we're resolving my brush with the right value. My brush here is using the solid color brush that's defined here. But for some reason, that one that's defined as setter is definitely not using the right one when we're running with Uno. It looks like it's transparent for some reason. Okay, so that makes it a bit clearer. And we're going to try to replicate this in the unit tests. Okay, so we have our border brush here. We have border 1, border 2. And we're going to make a UI test somewhere in there. We have... actually, I don't know. Guild XAML Reader, there you go. Probably should move all those files to be in a subfolder. Probably would be easier to read. Okay, we have static resource and marriage dictionary fluent, but that one is not the one we want. Okay, so we're going to be calling the test the same as the file that we just added. Loading the file, and then we're going to be finding border 1 and border 2. So we're getting a page, not a user control. And we're trying to find border 1 and border 2. And they're definitely borders. And then we get the brushes that are on the border brush. That's the one that we're looking for. So in the border brush, the border brush should be a solid color brush. So that's a bit of casting, but we're going to change it afterwards to make it nicer. And we're going to take the color for color 1, color 2. Let's call it. Let's take it that way. Color 2 and C1 and C2 should be they should be the same, I would guess. And it looks like the resolution is not the same between the two because they should be the same yellow. So that should be yellow. Okay, so let's see what we have. It should build fast enough. Since we haven't changed anything below. I don't think I've changed anything here. Just let's take a look. Yeah, it's using CSC explicitly, so that's fine. We're not having the legacy Uno source generation features that are running there and causing issues with the build time. Building Fluent, building Lottie. And there we go. And we have the tests almost there. So the first build takes a bit of time, and then the subsequent are behaving a bit faster. There we go. So is it running? Okay, it fails. And what do we have? Object failing in the wrong way. So we probably gonna be getting some of those that are incorrect. So we're not looking for resources, of course. Searching for find name. And it's not that. And that should be enough. Now that should build a bit faster now. At least we should be having less less targets. There you go. That's a lot better. Okay, so what do we have now? Should be failing again. Should be failing differently. No, still failing the same way. So probably we're missing, there's border 1, border 2. Did I name it the right way? They're named the right way. Okay, so let's go and figure out there what happens. So we have here our border. So we have the first border. And we have the second border. Okay, so that means that everything's working fine, which is what we expect. Now, one of the issue here is the fact that the border brush is, and that's probably something we can do differently in this test. So we can say border 1. Border 2. Border 1 here. Oop, that's a bit too much. And then that's our border brush here. And in there, that's it. Let's put it nullable. So in that context, what we're going to get is probably a solid color brush that will be null, and it will fail because it will not give the right color. So that's what we expect. That's the original issue where we're seeing that the solid color brush is not of the right color. So there you go. Okay, so that looks okay. That looks okay. And it's blue instead of yellow. That's probably yellow. No, that's not blue. I don't know what that. Green. It looks like green. Okay, so if it's green, or another color for that matter, it's actually quite interesting. Let's see. It's definitely not green either. C1. Okay, C2 is null. Okay, so it doesn't work. So that original color is not the right color. It's probably not yellow. It's probably another one. And I think it was pink because it's the one that was used originally as a solid color brush, which makes sense. So if we, I don't think we can do, yeah, it doesn't work here. Okay, so there we have it. We have the repro, and we should be having a border brush here, but it's not defined for some reason. So what we should be doing, and we have a few more minutes to take a look at this, is inside of the XAML reader, we have a XAML reader here. No, not that one. So there are two XAML readers. That's not the one we're looking at. XAML markup, that one. So we have the XAML object builder. And in that file, we're searching for static resources. And we're saying if it's a static resource, we're doing specific things with it. So that one looks okay. So let's go take a look at that one. Let's retry the test and see what we can get. And if we can get to the point where we get to the parsing of that specific instantiation. So we're talking about static resource, my border brush inside of the content control theme here. So we're going to see if we can find the right content and see if we can get something interesting. Okay, so the instance is a border brush. I don't know if we have the member here. Value from what? Value from setter. Okay, so that looks okay. It probably is the right one. We're talking about border brush. Probably should be changing the right one. So it's probably not that one. So I think if we go up again with the property border brush, I don't know if we can get to the instance of the style, maybe. No, that's a border brush. Let's see, root instance, page, that's not the right one. Member, not the right one either. Let's see, do we have an instance here? Still not the right one. Control members. No, that's not the right one either. Collection instance. Setter collection. Okay, so we're inside of a setter collection. And we are inside of a style. What's the name of the style? See if we're in the right one. Is there a name for a style? I don't know if the names appear here. They're probably not appearing here because they're added as part of another type. So processing a named instance, probably there's a name here. Resources. Okay, it's not. That's not the one I'm looking for. Page control. What do we have here? Control is not defined here. Okay, let's assume that's the right one for now because I'm not too sure. So we have a member here, and let's see which one do we get in there. We have a member. We have a set of objects. That's the object that we want to read. And the object is a theme resource, which is the one, not the one that we want, because the theme resource is probably the first one. So let's continue. What do we have now? Static resource. Okay, so that's probably the second one. And it's a setter. The value is null, but the members are my border brush. Okay, so that's probably a good one. So we have a resource node here. Oh, looks like we skipped quite a few things here. So we have a my border brush. We have we're not finding the target. Okay, so we have a property info still. So we get the property setter and okay, so that's interesting because we're still registering for apply theme resource update values, but it feels like we're probably not resolving the value because it's inside of a theme, inside of a style. So it could be something that we're not doing the right way. We have my border brush here. We have a value here. We're returning a setter. We're returning a setter as it is. Okay, so that may be the issue because we're not applying it to a dependency property for some reason. And we're trying to get to some update here. Because it's a static resource, it doesn't resolve its parents properly. That is very interesting. So that means that we're going to have to take a look at this next week, probably, and try to figure out if we're doing the resolution the right way. It could be that we're not doing it the right way. And we should be looking for the resource in its parent and not in some other resource. And the reason it's not happening at that point is that because we're setting the value here and we're not registering for updates, that means that the static resource itself just picks up what's available in the current context, which is pretty much nothing. And there's no update that's being done, so it becomes null, and there's nothing that happens to show. So that needs to be adjusted. So that's it for today. I hope you had an interesting time taking a look at all of this, because that was quite a few features we went around. And until next week, happy coding. Bye for now.